This is Philippines, currently one of the fastest growing economies in history. A record it's setting in a very unique way as compared to other players in the region like Vietnam, Thailand, and of course China too. Philippines is a collection of islands and is home to about 115 million people, which currently make up an overall poor population with an output roughly a third of the global average, which quite honestly is disappointing for our side. Philippines' economy is one that is a hard nut to crack, only if you are lazy to give it a keen look at what's making it look complicated. You see, the country has some of the greatest natural resource in the region, and as we all know, natural resources alone cannot make a country rich for long, and this is why Philippines has devised a formula that makes it just stand out. Due to some unique aspects of the country's geography, political history, and culture, it is quickly advancing and has the potential to become one of the most developed economies in Asia, comparable to Japan, Taiwan, and South Korea. And it has achieved this by leveraging its people as much as the natural resources it has. Even though the country is on the path to success, thanks to its stable and friendly nature to do a lot of business and other operations, Philippines also has got a very long list of challenges facing it that are both internal and external that could eventually scare it off the radar. Nevertheless, we want you to stay tuned till the end as we explain the economy of Philippines in detail, and also answer the following questions. What's fueling its rapid economic growth, and what are those challenges that could halt its progress? It all started when the United States took control of the Philippines from Spain during the Spanish-American War in 1898. The conflict began over issues related to Cuban independence, but it quickly expanded to other Spanish territories, including the Philippines. On May 1898, the U.S. Navy, under Commodore George Dewey, decisively defeated the Spanish fleet in the Battle of Manila Bay, crippling Spanish naval power in the Pacific. Following this victory, the U.S. and Spain negotiated the Treaty of Paris, signed on December 10, 1898, which formally ended the war. Under this treaty, Spain ceded the Philippines, along with Puerto Rico and Guam, to the United States in exchange for $20 million. Although Filipino revolutionaries led by Emilio Aguinaldo had already declared independence from Spain and hoped for American support, the treaty instead marked the beginning of American colonial rule. This led to the Philippine-American War, a brutal conflict that lasted from 1899 to 1902, as Filipinos resisted U.S. control. Despite calls for Filipino independence and resistance from guerrilla fighters, the U.S. ultimately decided to use the archipelago as a strategic base for accessing Asian trade. While this wasn't the official reason stated at the time, it was clearly a significant motivation. However, to become a competitive trading hub, the Philippines needed substantial investments in infrastructure. This was the early 20th century, a period when economic success increasingly depended on mechanization and modern infrastructure to support a diverse range of industries beyond agriculture. The U.S. military began funding the construction of hospitals, the renovation of roads, and the building of bridges. Manila, the capital, underwent significant changes during this period. Over the first few decades of the 20th century, America reshaped the Philippines in its own image, and English became the primary language, particularly in government and business, and the education system was reformed to promote American values, even if it meant sacrificing aspects of the country's cultural heritage. It can be very confusing to think that the U.S. was doing this out of compassion, but that wasn't the case. You see, Philippines has these islands which have proven to be of strategic importance to the United States. Nevertheless, Philippines has forever remained to be dependent on the U.S. for support, that even today, the Philippines' political and economic interests are intertwined with the United States, whether they are in for it or not. The Philippines faces a complex and delicate situation due to the ongoing territorial dispute with China over the South China Sea and the significant business investments from Japan, which have fostered a strategic partnership with the Philippine government. These dynamics mean that any tensions between the Philippines and its neighbors or business partners are closely tied to U.S. interests, and vice versa. For instance, if the U.S. has economic conflicts with China, such as issues related to trade routes in the South China Sea, these disputes will inevitably impact Philippine markets and businesses. Similarly, if Japanese investors seek to negotiate new deals with the Philippines, the U.S. is likely to intervene, either in the interest of its former colony or to protect its own stakes. However, the Philippines is a sovereign state, expected to manage its own economic challenges. This places the country in a precarious position, relying on the U.S. for economic stimulation and protection of its geopolitical interests, while trying to assert its independence and avoid being seen as merely an American puppet. This is a difficult balance to maintain, especially when the U.S. military personnel stationed in the country significantly contribute to local business and commerce. Currently, only about 500 U.S. military personnel are stationed in the Philippines, but more bases are planned for construction in the near future, with the U.S. paying generously for this strategic presence. When the cost for salaries and benefits for Americans stationed overseas are considered, this arrangement effectively serves as a form of indirect foreign aid, as the U.S. is channeling money into the Philippine economy through its troops. Accenture's success in the Philippines is largely due to the country's unique geographical, political, and cultural factors. Filipino workers provide more than just low-cost labor. They excel in knowledge-based services like back-office work, call centers, and even creative roles in marketing and design. This makes the Philippines an attractive destination for companies like Amazon, Apple, and Google, which integrate the country's workforce into their business operations, generating tens of billions of dollars due to the cost-effective labor available in the Philippines. Now, here the question comes, why is it these companies prefer Filipino workers, as compared to other more competitive countries like China, India, which has more English speakers, or even Thailand? The answer is simple, but a little intuitive. You see, decades of Western education, cultural influence, and work training meant that Filipinos can connect with Western clients in ways other Asian workers might not be able to. Also, besides that, the high standards and regulatory practices make them far more dependable. And to add on that, the lower cost of labor outcompetes the workers from Western countries with similar features. Plus, there is security concerns. Western companies are more inclined to hand over sensitive documents to Accenture or any other firm operating within the area than with their Chinese counterparts. Not only Western countries are never trusted, but also India. Another outsourcing hub had more than enough scandals and leaks within recent years to lose credibility in the eyes of potential business partners. In 2019, T-Mobile sued the Chinese manufacturer Huawei, accusing the company of stealing its technology through an Indian subcontractor. A report from the U.S. Department of Justice revealed that Huawei had offered businesses to employees for stealing confidential information from companies worldwide, leading to indictments for wire fraud and obstruction of justice. That same year, Wipro, one of India's largest IT firms, suffered a severe data breach, allegedly by a nation-state actor who accessed their systems months before the breach was detected. It's not just private companies facing these challenges. Government and public agencies are also increasingly regretting outsourcing sensitive or publicly funded projects. Concerns over lax regulations and attitudes towards IP theft have led the United States to blacklist major tech outsourcing companies from India and China, which is a severe blow to economies that depend on outsourcing to support their GDP. While these bans may have geopolitical motives, they present a significant opportunity for the Philippines. The country doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be the best available option. In addition to Western customs and strong practices, the Philippines' unique geography plays a key role in its outsourcing process. However, this same geography, being a series of islands with limited landmass, also restricts the range of services it can offer, contributing to industrial stagnation. Infrastructure connecting the islands in the Philippines is limited, and in some areas, it's non-existent, making physical development and industrial expansion a constant challenge. The lack of usable land also means that manufacturing and transportation were never likely to be the country's strengths. However, this limitation has a silver lining, as it steers the Philippines away from direct competition with China's manufacturing-based economy and toward white-collar services. Available land is better suited for offices and studios rather than factories or processing facilities. While carving out a niche in white-collar services can be advantageous, it comes with trade-offs. The Philippines faces a significant trade deficit, importing far more than it exports with a gap of around $57 billion annually. Even with a stronger manufacturing sector, the economy would still need to find other revenue sources to bridge this gap. Now that we all know that some money may come from services to overseas clients and their remittances that are actually not enough to stabilize the economy. The Philippines needs to find another source of revenue to make this work. That's when this shipbuilding thing comes to play. But even though shipbuilding has been a promising growth industry, the Philippines actually doesn't have that industrial capacity to compete with the mega shipyards of Japan, South Korea, and China. Instead of making a few mega ships, it has built a more reliable industry producing smaller, less impressive vessels. Due to its geography, fleets of smaller cargo ships and ferries are already operating across the archipelago. So, the country has a long history of dealing with these more basic vessels. For every 20,000 TEU cargo ship demanded by the world's largest shipping companies, there are thousands of ferries and basic crossing the world's oceans. This strategy of doing basic things and doing a lot of it has really been the driver of the growth the Philippines has experienced over the last 2 decades. Another growth driver has been in components like basic microchip production. While the Philippines' tech sector may not be as lucrative as Taiwan's or dominate high-end markets like processors, it doesn't need to compete in the same arenas. Basic microchips, though less glamorous, are in high demand for countless everyday devices, from home electronics to simpler hardware. While the Philippines might not reach the top of billion-dollar industries, it excels in mid-tier operations, combining strengths in basic microchips, consulting, shipbuilding, and electronics to carve out a solid niche. The profits might be modest, but so are the costs. However, staying in the middle of the road has its limits. Advanced economies don't thrive by focusing solely on basic industries. For the Philippines to move into the global middle class, it must upscale some of these sectors. With a talented workforce and strong global connections, this is achievable. Yet other factors could threaten its economic stability beyond just market competition. While corruption in the Philippines is like a daily cake, and it's so deeply entrenched across many levels of government and business that it stunts economic growth from the get-go. Everything from the misuse of public spending to good old-fashioned kickbacks and bribes, domestic industries and local business are less likely to receive funding from the country's government, which already has a history of eroding public trust. In 2023, the Philippines was ranked 115th out of 180 countries on the Corruption Perception Index. Even without the challenge of confronting corrupt officials, the complexities of bureaucratic red tape discourage many Filipinos from starting their own businesses. Foreign investors are similarly wary, often choosing to keep their dealings at a distance. This cautious approach limits the number of individuals willing to take the necessary risks to push the country's industries forward, especially given the existing sovereign risks associated with the Philippines. Besides just corruption issues, the Philippines has been experiencing issues to do with political instability, and this caps any confidence an outside investor may have. And not just that, another problem lies in its geography and population distribution. The Philippines is experiencing inequalities when it comes to this. Manila, for example, is the most densely populated city in the world, with a per capita income more than 10 times higher than the remote islands. And it's been rising at such a steady rate that things are unlikely to even out in the future. Compare that to the living conditions of the remote islands where a majority of people still live in absolute poverty. This disparity denies talented workers from impoverished areas a real shot of making it in the outsourced labor market. While this may not be enough, real living conditions are also not much better for people living in big cities either, and this has forced some workers to mitigate these costs by living outside Manila. The vast urban sprawl has contributed to terrible living conditions, with basic amenities failing to keep up. All in all, the Philippines need to work on these challenges to ensure that it strives for excellence, because they can be a major setback in its growth to success. What are your thoughts on this? Please don't forget to share with us your suggestions in the comment box section. Thanks everyone for watching. Let's meet in our next episode.